Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got another slate of picks for the next week of the 2021-2022 college football season. Before we get to those picks though, please like this video, share it with anyone else you think might enjoy it. Be sure to also subscribe to my channel and hit that notification button so that way you'll be alerted to any new videos that crop up on my channel about college football or history or anything else that I may do. All right, so let's get into the action, shall we? It's been a busy week for me this week, so I have not been able to do the research that I normally do when it comes to certain games that I have trouble picking right off the top of my head week to week. So this week is going to be interesting because it's basically all gut feeling, and a lot of it's going to be whatever eye test I have for the teams that are playing this week in the top 25. Last week, let's look at the overall record. I was 14-7 last week. Not great, but still twice as many wins as losses, so that's good. I am 82-23 overall, so not bad. Wish I was a little bit better, but not bad. For top 25 matchups, I was 3-1 last week. Yes, I know. I made a horrendous pick thinking the Ole Miss was going to beat Alabama last week. They only lost by 3 touchdowns, and they were down by like 4 or 5 touchdowns at one point in that game. I have learned my lesson, and do I regret that Ole Miss pick? Yes. Yes, I do. That might very well be the last time I pick against the Alabama Crimson Tide this season, at least until we get to the SEC championship game. And even then, I don't know. Learned my lesson on that one. I am 11-5 in my top 25 picks overall this season. In better news, I was 2-0 in my top 10 matchups last week, which makes me a perfect 4-0 in calling top 10 matchups on the year. So when the games are worth the most, I am picking the best. So let's get into this week's slate of games, shall we? We've got the aforementioned number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide going on the road to play the now no longer in the top 25 Texas A&M University Aggies. I ain't picking against Alabama this week. Go with Bama. Their defense is going to swallow up Texas A&M's quarterback. They just will. Number 2, the Georgia Bulldogs coming off a shutout win where they absolutely dominated Arkansas. Arkansas was averaging about 480 yards of offense a game going into last week's matchup versus Georgia. They had like less than 200 yards of offense the whole game, I think. It was an absolute disaster for them, an absolutely impressive display for the Georgia defense. Their offense did enough to be able to score points consistently and allow them to pull away from the Arkansas Razorbacks. They are on the road at Auburn. Auburn was lucky to escape LSU last week with a victory. One of the ways it was this absolutely miraculous scramble from Auburn quarterback Bo Nix, and LSU defenders having, I think, 4 or 5 opportunities to tackle him and missing. That ain't going to happen against the Georgia defense. Even though it's at Auburn, and Auburn's now up to number 18 in the rankings, so this is a top 25 matchup. Georgia's defense is just too good. They're going to overwhelm Bo Nix and that Auburn offense. Go with the Georgia Bulldogs. The biggest matchup of the week, and maybe the biggest matchup of the season thus far. The number 3 Iowa Hawkeyes at home against the number 4 Penn State Nittany Lions. Before we get to that game, though, how about the Big Ten representing in football this week? Number 3, Iowa. Number 4, Penn State. Number 7, Ohio State. Number 9, Michigan. Number 11, Michigan State. That's 5 teams in the top 11 in this week's rankings. The Big Ten is proving its worth early on in this season, and there is a titanic Big Ten matchup coming up in Iowa City at Kinnick Stadium. When I first found out this game was taking place, I was watching the Penn State game last week. It was near the end of the game, and they were previewing upcoming schedules, and they were saying Penn State's got a huge matchup against Iowa. The first thing I thought was Iowa's going to win that game. I don't believe that Penn State is really the 4th best team in the nation. I think Penn State got way too much credit for beating Wisconsin at the beginning of this season. I think they jumped up like 6 or 8 spots in the rankings after that win. Yeah, it's on the road at Wisconsin, but this incarnation of the Wisconsin Badgers is 1-3 for the first time in 30 years. So that win does not look as impressive. And they barely beat an Auburn team that I don't think is actually that good, despite the fact that they're rated 18th in the country right now, and probably about to get the doors blown off them by Georgia. So for some reason, though, that crap win against Wisconsin is not really setting Penn State back from continuing to climb the rankings. I just don't trust them. I think they're a good team. I think they're a top maybe 15 team, probably 15 team, maybe top 10, but top 5 team? No. I don't believe that they're the 4th best team in the nation. Iowa, I'm not sure if they're the 3rd best team in the nation, but they have a really good defense. Not Georgia caliber defense, but they got a dang good defense. They are tied for 1st in the nation in turnover margin. I think they're 1st or they're highly ranked when it comes to the number of interceptions they've got this season. Their defense not only stops you, but they turn the ball over quite a bit. They make you fumble. They pick you off. They score points on defense. And it's a night game. No, actually, I'm looking at the schedule now. It says on the schedule 4 p.m., but I thought I saw that it got moved to being a night game. But teams that go into Kinnick Stadium, top-ranked teams that go into Kinnick Stadium, don't usually fare all that well. Ask Ohio State about that. They went into Kinnick Stadium a couple of years ago, highly rated, got housed by like 20-some points. Ask Michigan about that. They went into Kinnick Stadium, I think a top 5 ranking. They got beat by a field goal. Ask the Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley version of the Penn State Nittany Lions, who went into Kinnick Stadium a couple of years ago and needed a touchdown on literally the last play of the game to escape with a victory. I think a lot of people in Iowa remember that game specifically. And I think they're going to be very motivated. I think the crowd is going to be going out of their friggin' minds. And I think Iowa's defense gets the job done. So go with the Iowa Hawkeyes in what is going to be one of the best matchups of not just the weekend, but probably of the season thus far. Number 5, the Cincinnati Bearcats, coming off a huge win on the road against Notre Dame. I called that one. They are returning home to Cincinnati to take on Temple. They're taking them on tonight at 7 p.m. That's just about 4.5 hours from now. Go with Cincinnati. I don't think Cincinnati has a letdown after the big emotional win against Notre Dame. Temple's not that good. I think even if Cincinnati's not emotionally up for this one, I think they come in businesslike. I think they do enough to get the job done. Go with Cincinnati. The number 6 Oklahoma Sooners in the Red River Showdown against number 21 Texas. This is at a neutral site game. This is at the Cotton Bowl. It's the site of the Texas State Fair. It's a huge event, a massive game in the Big 12, and a game that has potential playoff ramifications because the Oklahoma Sooners are the 6th ranked team in the nation right now. Texas has climbed its way back into the top 25 after a couple of weeks ago dropping 70-some points on Texas Tech. They seem like they're rebounding after that beatdown they suffered at the hands of Arkansas on the road a few weeks ago. But again, Texas Tech necessarily isn't a team to write home about, and I don't really know if they've played a lot of real great competition since that Arkansas game. But they are winning. They're getting into the Big 12 schedule, so it's not like they're playing a bunch of like FCS cupcake teams. I mean, they're playing FBS opponents. They're playing Big 12 opponents, and they're winning. Now they've got the big game against Oklahoma. Both teams are going to be up emotionally for this one. I'm starting to think that this version of the Oklahoma Sooners is the type of team that is gritty, the type of team that does not win pretty, but they win. They're going to play close games all season long. They're going to eke out a couple of close games, but they're a team that's going to know how to handle pressure, and they're going to know how to handle adversity when they face it because they've been facing it all season. They were played tough by Nebraska for 4 quarters. They barely got by Tulane earlier this season. Other than that beatdown of Western Carolina, they've played tough opponents. Well, their opponents have played them tough, I should say. And Oklahoma hasn't looked as pretty as they looked under Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts. But maybe that's not what this Oklahoma team is. Maybe this Oklahoma team isn't the offensive juggernaut that they used to be. Maybe since they're playing much better defense, maybe they're starting to see more parity between the two sides of the ball on their own team. I think that this Oklahoma team will get the job done against Texas. I think that they'll eke out a victory. I think it's going to be an instant classic, so to speak. I think it's going to be a very good game. But I think, again, Oklahoma ekes out a victory. I think they find a way to win. I think they find a way to overcome adversity, to stay unbeaten, and to try to keep their top 10 ranking. So go with the Sooners. Number 7, the aforementioned Ohio State Buckeyes. They are home versus Maryland, who got absolutely torn apart by Iowa last week. Ohio State, meanwhile, absolutely destroyed Rutgers. I don't picture Maryland putting up much of a fight in this one. So go with Ohio State. Number 8, the Oregon Ducks are home versus Cal. Oregon has had some setbacks this week because one of their 2 major starting running backs and the leading rusher on their team, CJ Verdell, has a lower leg injury that has put him out for the whole season. That is a huge offensive loss for a run-first offense. They still have Dye running the ball, and they still have Anthony Brown who can move, but without CJ Verdell in the mix, it's going to be much harder for Oregon to produce the way they've been producing offensively, and someone else on that offense is going to have to step up. One of the receivers is going to have to step up to allow Anthony Brown to throw the ball more. He's going to have to maybe even rely on his legs a little bit more. Dye is going to have to carry more of the load for Oregon. They're going to be struggling a bit. In addition, one of their starting safeties is also out for the season, so they have a defensive injury that is going to set them back a little bit. I've seen Cal play once this season. They played TCU. They played them tough. They lost that game, though, I believe. The Pac-12 has this strange ability to upset my picks. I'll pick Washington going into Arizona State when they're clearly the better team and they're ranked, and they'll drop the game to the Sun Devils. I'll call Washington State at home against Cal when Washington State is ranked and they're clearly a better team and they'll drop a game. Do I think this is the game where this is going to happen to Oregon? No. They lost last week on the road at Stanford in overtime. I think they get back on track. I think Coach Mario Cristobal gets the troops redisciplined, and I think they take care of business against Cal. But those injuries that I mentioned are going to be a problem for Oregon later on this season. Number 9, the Michigan Wolverines. They are at Nebraska. This is a nationally televised game that is at night at Nebraska. Now, listen, I've seen my Spartans ranked go into Lincoln for a night game televised on ESPN, clearly the better team, and get beat. And this Nebraska team is a tough out. They took my Spartans just a week or two ago, 4 quarters and then some before they finally fell. They took Oklahoma for 4 quarters on the road. This is a tough Nebraska team. I don't think this Nebraska team is that great. I don't think they're that good. But they're one of those pesky teams that's hard to beat and hard to look good doing it. If you need an impressive win and you've got Nebraska coming up on your schedule for the next game, you're kind of going, crap. Because this is just a team that's going to work hard and it's going to make it difficult on you. Michigan, meanwhile, they're still trying to find themselves on offense. They're playing hardball ball. They're running it a lot. They're playing good defense. I think it's going to be a tough environment for Michigan, but I think Michigan is the better team. I think their defense is going to make it tough for Martinez, Nebraska's quarterback. I think that Michigan's running game is good enough that it will allow them to play ball control. I think they'll control the clock. They'll limit the possessions that Nebraska has. And I think this game will look similar to the game Michigan played against Washington earlier this season, where it's a low-scoring game, lots of defense, lots of time of possession being run off the clock. I think Michigan just slowly pulls away over the course of the game and wins in what, if you don't watch the game, will look like a beatdown, but really is just kind of a slow burn where Michigan just imposes their will over the course of the game. I think it's tough. I think the early going is going to look up in the air, but I think over the course of the game, especially in the second half, I think Michigan begins to pull away from Nebraska on this. So go with Michigan. Number 10, the Byu Cougars cracking into the top 10 this week. They are home against Boise State. You know how much I love my Boise State Broncos, but they're not as good this year now that Coach Brian Harsin is in Auburn. They don't seem to have the talent. They've lost a couple of games already this season. And that BYU team, I mentioned this last time, there's just something that seems special about this team. Something that seems just a little bit, dare I say, magical about this team. That just seems like they've got good chemistry. They just seem like they're figuring out how to win. They seem like they're having fun. So I think BYU is going to win this game. They beat down Boise, I think either last season or the season before. They absolutely destroyed them. Look for BYU to win this game. Number 11, my Michigan State Spartans. They're on the road at Rutgers. Rutgers played Michigan tough on the road 2 weeks ago, then got bombed out of the arena by Ohio State. I think Michigan comes in after a win against Western Kentucky. They scored 48 points, but they let up 31. That has me a little concerned. I don't think they let up that many points to Rutgers. I think they win more handily against Rutgers. Not to the level Ohio State beat them, but I think they win comfortably on the road in New Jersey, so go with MSU. Number 12, the Oklahoma State Sooners, coming off that win against Baylor last week. They have a bye week this week. Next week, October 16th, they are at Texas, so Oklahoma State will be resting this week. Look for them to beat those suckers from Byu University. Number 13, the Arkansas Razorbacks, coming off the absolute beatdown they suffered at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs, are on the road once again, taking on the Ole Miss Rebels, who themselves are coming off a beatdown at the hands of the Alabama Crimson Tide. So both these teams got beat down by SEC opponents last week. Both these teams are looking to rebound this week. In this matchup, Arkansas's offense, I know they're facing a stout, very good, probably the best total defense in the country, Georgia Bulldog team, but they just looked so bad. They just looked like they couldn't get their act together whatsoever. Ole Miss at least managed to score some points against Alabama. Yeah, I think they got one touchdown like late in garbage time, but at least they managed to score some points. I think since this game is at Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss's offense will get back on track. I think Matt Corral, who didn't have a bad game last week, didn't have a great game though. People were talking about Matt Corral, Ole Miss's quarterback, as being in the Heisman conversation. Well, that game against Alabama was one that he had to have a stellar game for, and not bad, but again, not good. Not like Heisman-worthy performance. I think he gets back on track on this one. This is a game that I had wanted to do some research in, and so I'm just kind of going with my gut feeling. I've seen them both play a little bit this season, but every time I saw Arkansas play very well against Texas, and then I saw them stink against Georgia. I saw Ole Miss play very well against Louisville earlier this season, and although I didn't get a chance to watch the game against Alabama, I saw some of the highlights and saw them play poorly against Alabama. I think Ole Miss had a better showing last week that they'll build some momentum off of this week. So I think Ole Miss gets the upset here. So go with Mississippi. Number 14, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, coming off their home loss at the hands of the Cincinnati Bearcats. They are on the road against the Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech is one of the toughest places in college football to play. They've got Enter Sandman that's playing at the beginning. Everyone gets all hyped up. There's tons of people just absolutely going out of their minds. I still don't think Virginia Tech is all that good, though. And I said a few weeks ago that with this stretch of games Notre Dame had, Wisconsin, followed by Cincinnati, followed by Virginia Tech, I did not see them getting through all three unbeaten, and they didn't. They lost to Cincinnati last week. I think they make the corrections this week that they needed to make. I think they go on the road to Virginia Tech, and I think Notre Dame gets a win. I think they escape from Blacksburg with a win. It's not comfortable. It's not going to look pretty, but I think they escape with a win and keep themselves with just a single loss on the season. Number 15, the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. They played last night. I did not get a chance to get this video done before their game started. They won that game, but because I did not get the picks in before it started, I will not count that game as part of the record for this week and my overall record. I would have picked Coastal Carolina, though. Dang it. They dominated that game, but they played last night and they won. Number 16, the Kentucky Wildcats, coming off their 7-point win against the University of Florida last week. They are 5-0, and they're taking on an LSU team that let Auburn get by them at home. Now that LSU team travels to Kentucky, this is another one that I would have liked to have done some research on, because part of me says that LSU is going to be angry. They're going to be mad about letting Bo Nix run around them and then throw that touchdown pass in the game, and that they're going to get revenge and they're going to take it out on the Kentucky Wildcats. I have not gotten a chance to see Kentucky play that much this season, so I don't know how good they really are. But the game is home. It's at Kentucky. This could possibly be a letdown game, and I'd be more inclined to say that it is if they were playing a better team. LSU's decent to good, but they're not that good. So I'm going to lean towards Kentucky on this one at home to follow up their win versus Florida with another win against LSU. So go with Kentucky on this one. Number 17, Ole Miss. I've already said that they're going to beat Arkansas. Number 18, Auburn. I've already said that they're going to lose to Georgia. Number 19, the 5-0 Wake Forest Demon Deacons, coming off a 3-point win against Louisville last week in a game that was very entertaining to watch. I watched some parts of that game, among others. They are on the road at Syracuse. I don't think Syracuse is all that good this season. I'm going to trust Wake Forest to go to 6-0, even though the game is on the road, and going from North Carolina to upstate New York isn't necessarily a short trip, but I don't really know much about Syracuse. I don't think they're all that good. I've seen Wake Forest play. They're not bad. Wake Forest is not a bad team this year. Coach Dave Clawson has built something special this year, I think, at Wake Forest. So go with the Demon Deacons. Number 20, the Florida Gators, coming off that unexpected loss to Kentucky last week. They get some good medicine this week because they are home against Vanderbilt. So go with the Florida Gators on that one. Number 21, Texas. I've already said I believe that they're going to lose to number 6, Oklahoma, in the Red River Showdown. Number 22, Arizona State, coming off their big win against UCLA last week. That, I believe, is another one that I got wrong. They are playing against Stanford later tonight at 10:30, a Stanford team that's coming off their own big win against Oregon at home. They are hosting now another ranked team in Arizona State. I haven't seen much of Stanford, but it seems like after that loss, that bad loss against Kansas State to start the season, it seems like every week Stanford's getting a little bit better. It seems like they're building momentum, they're getting the ball rolling, they're figuring out who they are, they're playing teams tough. I'm going to call the upset on this one. I'm going to say that Stanford is going to get Arizona State tonight, and that they're going to make it 2 in a row for upsets over ranked teams within their own conference. I'm going to go with the Cardinal. Number 23, North Carolina State, still in the top 25. They beat Louisiana Tech by 7 points last week. They are on the road at a tough BC team. This is another one that I probably would have wanted some time to do some research on, because BC's not bad. They're not great, but they're not bad. But so is North Carolina State. They're also not great, but they're not bad. It's on the road for North Carolina State. They didn't win by that much against Louisiana Tech last week, but they didn't have a letdown after the big win against Clemson. They now have a shot with Clemson having 2 losses on the season, 1 already in conference. North Carolina State has a shot to perhaps go places in the ACC this season if things bounce right for them. But Boston College is also looking at it from the same perspective. I don't really know on this one. I haven't seen Boston College really play at all this season. I've seen North Carolina State a couple of times. I saw them in the game against Clemson. I saw them in the beatdown of South Florida earlier this season. I'm going to stick with the ranked team on this one over the home team in BC, and I'm going to go with North Carolina State out of really nothing. There's really no reason I'm picking them because I don't really know anything about Boston College, so I'm basing it just on the eye test I've seen from the Wolfpack. So go with North Carolina State. Number 24, SMU. The Mustangs are back in the rankings. They are on the road at Navy. This is not the same Navy team that's been competitive in the American Athletic Conference the last few years. SMU is 5-0. I think they're good enough to go on the road and to beat the midshipmen, and that poses something very interesting because SMU and Cincinnati are going to play later this season. And if Cincinnati can beat them and SMU can still be ranked very well, can still be ranked and can still have 1 loss at the end of the season, that would give Cincinnati wins over Indiana, who's actually not that good, but it's still a Group of 5 team over a Power 5 team. They'd have the huge win on the road against, and at the time, undefeated and top 10 ranked Notre Dame, and they'd have a win against an SMU team that might be ranked and undefeated when they play Cincinnati. Those are major feathers in Cincinnati's cap, looking ahead to playoff contention at the end of the season. So go with SMU. I don't think Navy's all that good. I think the Mustangs look good, so go with them. And then rounding out the top 25, San Diego State University. The Aztecs cracking the top 25. They're 4-0. They are home against the University of New Mexico. New Mexico ain't any good. Go with the Aztecs on that. So there you have it. Those are the picks for the next week of the 2021-2022 college football season. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video, share it with anyone else you think would enjoy it. Also, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification button so that you'll be alerted to any and all videos that crop up when they crop up here on my YouTube channel. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time.